Welcome to today's podcast interview. I brought on Eric Holsapple. Eric, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Heather. Pleasure to be here.
I'm excited. We found out during the pre-call that you're actually practically a neighbor here in the Denver area. But for those new to you, please give a little background. Where do you live and what do you do?
I live in Loveland, Colorado. My profession has been as a real estate developer. Been doing that for about 40 years. And I also taught at the university here, Colorado State, for about 20 years in real estate. And most recently, I've taken the principles that we've founded our business on and launched a nonprofit called Living in the Gap, where we train professionals in mindfulness, how you can be mindful and continue to make money and make a bigger difference with less stress and more satisfaction.
I want to start there because first of all, I'd like to define what does mindfulness mean to you? I think it's very much a mainstream term. I talk about it a lot, living mindfully and intentionally. But when we're talking about it in, let's say, the corporate world or that lens, what is mindfulness?
Well, if I boil it down to one word in a corporate sense, now there's and my focus is on business and corporate. There's a lot of platforms, a lot of places that focus on mindfulness, more generally for the masses. But the most applicable for business is focus. How do I focus on what I'm doing in the moment to the exclusion of all else? And really cut down on the distractions and stress and everything else that's going on there at work. And then equally as important, or more important actually, is then when I'm headed home, can I turn that off and can I turn my focus on my family and not be constantly drawn back into the workday and not be really present for them? Because there for me is why I go to work in the first place. So if I can't turn that off, it's not very useful.
Well, I think that's something to bring to everyone's attention is our attention is constantly being pulled in a million different directions. I hear from people all the time, overwhelmed, analysis paralysis, that monkey mind, that
Yeah.
mental chaos, not sleeping at night. So can we talk about maybe that you use in your life or that you teach others or talk about what are some daily mindfulness practices
Yeah.
anyone could implement?
Well, the lowest hanging fruit's gratitude. I think the
Yeah.
simplest, fastest, most impactful thing is, it's generally, practice three gratitudes and why. You just can experience an immediate mindset shift.
Yeah.
Um, Having the intention to be more mindful is huge, to have that intention and then to have some practice of it. Now, it isn't meditation for everybody. Some is, and if it is that, I suggest starting with a couple of minutes, not 10, not 15, not 20, but like 2 minutes of meditation until the mind calms down a little bit. A mindful walk can
Yeah.
be huge. And that what's a mindful walk? Well, it doesn't include your phone. You know, it can be with another person, but focus on that person and who you're with. But you walk, you look in the trees a little bit, notice the nature. We're kind of divorced from nature, but anything, but really focusing on what you're doing in the moment. So, and
Yeah.
also find most of us have something. My wife, it's art. For me, it's snow skiing. Some people it's knitting. Some people it's, the gym. But notice when you are really present and really, enjoy that time and then try to bring that other. My mission is to bring that work, to help people bring that focus and that mindful thing when they're really at work, not having a meeting when all your screens are open and, it's an hour and a half. It could be 20-minute meeting, to really get something done.
That's the word that's top of mind for me when I talk about mindfulness is creating presence. And like you
Totally.
shared, we all have that different thing where we're, quote, in the zone when time passes by. For me, I have a lot of ways of doing it. Running is a huge one.
Yeah.
We live in Colorado, being in the mountains, being in nature. I love cooking. I love being creative, creating content. So, any of those that keep us present in the now, that is
It's
mindfulness.
really, really, really important.
Yes.
And then we work on even the other things, the simple things as washing the dishes or washing our hands, and particularly when we're with our friends or loved ones or children, can we be with them? Kids, the
Yeah.
only thing they really want is your attention. The rest of
Yeah.
it, is what we're giving them. So because we're not willing to give them our attention, if we could really give them our attention, that's really what people are craving for.
You know what? Something else is coming to mind. A friend of mine sent a video last night. He was at a business dinner, and even then, I was like, "Man, just be present. Just be at dinner."
Yeah.
And I cannot make this up. I think there were 7 people at the table and 4 of them were on their phone.
Yeah, it happens. I mean, I catch
Yeah.
myself on it. I mean, it's our culture right now, right?
Yeah.
And the only way to take it back is to for yourself, because business is very good at claiming our attention.
Yeah.
And we love to be distracted. We love it. So starting to notice that you're distracted, giving that up and say, no, not right now. Right now, I'm going to focus on being with Heather. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. Well, and exactly when I do podcast interviews, for me to keep my attention, I put my phone on DND, do not disturb. I put everything away. I close all my browsers. So I'm with you. That is how I do it. But that's intentional, right?
Yes. Well, and what you learn in a life of mindfulness is that everything's intentional, right? Or it's automatic and just blind. But
Right.
to be more intentional is the real gift of mindfulness.
Or I guess the terms I use often are you're either being conscious or unconscious. Yes. Here's what I want to ask you because, this is something big for you, and I want you to define this term and let's talk about it. But this idea of living in the gap, what does that mean?
Well, there's a lot of gaps. The primary one is there's a little gap. It can be when one thought stops before another one starts. We have some 6,000 thoughts a day, and most of mine aren't that productive. Most of them are repetitive, and so. But the goal of a practice is to start having a little separation between your thoughts and that part of you that's noticing the thoughts. That's really freeing. Stress and anxiety reside in thought, peace and joy and reside in those little gaps, the silence in between thoughts. It's like when you see that sunrise, you go, oh, and it just stops for a minute.
Yeah.
That's a gap. You start finding those gaps, and that's where you find a center, you find your intuition in it, you find a little joy in that. And when you're really feeling stressed, let those thoughts go and just come back and find a place that it's not, because it's not what happens to us that's stressful. It's what we think about it. I mean, life happens, right? Life is a series of things, some of them good, some of them not so good.
Yeah.
If we live in that, we're going to be, fraught with ups and downs. But if we can find that spot from where we notice things, that's the gap.
So something you're touching on is becoming the observer, where, and I don't
Yeah.
know if it was Byron Katie or who I originally heard this
Oh,
from, but I don't think people understand that you have thoughts, you are not your thoughts.
exactly.
So when we live in this distracted universe, our minds going, most people are unconscious and autopilot, stress and anxiety, that has become, quote, the habit, cultural conditioning. How can we break the pattern, break the cycle, pause to create this change in our life?
Well, I say it has to be with an intention, and you have to start small and be consistent. You have to start with some sort of practice in which you say, I'm going to do. I mean, anything we do of value, anybody, a musician, an athlete, a business person, whoever it is, they have a practice. They have a ritual. They have practices. They have routines that they do. Mindfulness is no different. So you have to start with saying, I'm going to claim it back. So in our programs, we start people with the gratitudes and then 3 minutes, 2 minutes of meditation. And I just find it, okay, when that's a habit, then go to 3, 4, 5. But, start small and be consistent and just start noticing when you're there and when you're not. It's a practice. The practice is really simple. It's not easy, but it's noticing when you're present and noticing, and then when you're not noticing when you're not present and coming back.
Yeah.
Noticing, when you're not present and just coming back. It's more like training a puppy, that's just trying to constantly trying to get it back on the newspaper. You don't beat the puppy. You just kind of constantly keep bringing the puppy back until the puppy gets trained. Your mind's like that. Our minds are crazy.
And consistency is key.
I think it's much more important than the length of time. It's to do it, and then the payoff is that once I start having that calm, I want to do a little more because it feels good. I want to sit for a little longer. And if meditation is just not new, you have to find something like a
Yeah.
walk in nature, or something that in which you're present and practice it regularly.
I want to share with you. So, the idea of meditation, like to take the woo woo out of it, and I don't believe it's woo woo at all. I believe it's actually necessary. But for me, I define meditation as one, it's sensory deprivation. So, again, quieting those distractions. And then it's a training of our awareness.
Right.
And I remember when I started, oh my gosh. And it was like a client of mine, he described it great. He's like, I feel like I'm crawling out of my skin because it was so uncomfortable.
I would say the opposite. I feel like I'm crawling into my skin.
But
I
when
felt
you
like I'm,
started,
oh, I don't know about that. Okay. Fair enough.
yeah,
After you get going a little bit, it's like, and like why I
yeah,
like yoga is it's like
yes,
embodying my body and getting back into my body
yeah.
and inhabiting it versus just living in my thoughts.
Well, I just want to offer that to individuals. When I began, it was uncomfortable, right? We're out of our
Yeah.
comfort zone. It was uncomfortable. It didn't, quote, feel right. And now I crave it. The longest one I've done with Dr. Joe Dispenza at his events, a 4 hour one, which felt like 2 minutes.
Wow.
I mean, that's getting in the zone. And now literally I crave the solitude,
So
the silence.
so many people when they start, they notice that craze and they say, I can't meditate.
Right.
And I say, well, you just did, because just noticing that is meditation. It's becoming familiar with, it's noticing. So when I notice that I have those busy thoughts, that's all right. I'm noticing it. I
Mhm.
notice it. So we have some sort of something we call our focus to, most commonly the breath. There are mantras, there are other things, but we just keep bringing we notice that we have the busy mind, we let it go, we come back to our breath. Try it for a couple of minutes and see what happens.
Okay, something you just touched on, and I would love for you to share, kind of where you used to be in your 20s, because you
Yeah,
said yoga was you had all the quote success, financial success, but miserable in your health, relationships.
yeah.
And that's where a lot of people are. So, can you please paint a picture where you were compared to where you are today?
Yeah, in my 20s, I was really successful. I was the president of a North American division of an Australian company for real estate. I lived in LA. I traveled to Denver and New Jersey, ran offices. I was a walking boarding pass. And I had, the car, the apartment, the title, but I was miserable. So I had a transfer into Boston and they wanted me to go work on a New York Stock Exchange company, which I did. And the real benefit was traveling stopped. There were enough problems in town, and I got a scale. Because where I was hanging out was the bars, and there weren't scales. So I got a scale. I stepped on that thing. I said, "Holy mackerel! You got to make some changes. You're not going to be around very long." I was having some pains. I hadn't been to the gym in 5 years. I don't know if I owned a pair of sneakers. I just had shoes, and I just made it right then. And I made a change, and I went on a diet. I stopped drinking. I did some things, and I found yoga. I don't know how I found it. There weren't yoga studios all over like there are today. I found a DVD disc, and I just got started. And it was like an immediate shift. And then my brother, was 10 years older than me. He's a poet, and my dad was a football coach, and they were like oil and water.
Yeah.
And I watched my brother start meditation, and he came back to the family. He hadn't been around. And then I saw him open up to my dad, and I saw my dad open up, and my dad didn't change. He was in his 70s. He was conservative. He didn't change. But I just noticed one person change, and it changed the whole world. His perception changed. He opened up, and it changed my whole family dynamic. He said, "Do you want to try it?" And I said, "Sure. I'll try that." That's like, it was like a magic thing. And I tried it. I had immediate results. It was better for athletics. I was calmer. I was better at work. I was more focused. I slept better. Just so I started a daily practice 25 years ago or so, and I've stuck with it now for years. I was a closet meditator. I didn't come out. I
Yeah.
didn't, I didn't run around saying like this on podcasts or, I'm meditating. I just did it myself. I did my little yoga and meditation routine. Years later in business, people started asking me what I was doing. I started being someone that people could talk to because I run pretty fast. I run 100 miles an hour and things. And they just, what are you doing? And, at work, one by one, I started sharing it. We started a little seed group where we read a book together and have a little practice. Usually call it centering, not meditation, so we don't weird people out. And before I knew it, the room was full. And we put it in the whole company, and the vision statement. The management team got together and changed the vision statement to mindfully creating community. And it's been a great ride. Everybody started working with nonprofits and making a bigger difference in the community. And I launched a nonprofit myself and started offering it through Living in the Gap to other professionals. So,
What I love about this is, was it Gandhi who said, "Be the change you wish to see"? Was that Gandhi?
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love him. Yes.
And one person, just like you shared with your brother meditating, but even you were able to shift an entire company culture, aka known as like a paradigm, and you've created community, and it's
Yeah.
now touching so many more people. But I think that's the important thing is that we have to start with ourselves.
Always. That's, so many people, especially you get a leader involved and they go, yeah, you should get my people doing this. No, it doesn't work that way. You do it.
Yeah.
And then, if somebody else wants to join in, great. But the nice thing about it is, yeah, you doing it can change everything because your perception is your reality.
Mm-hmm.
You start seeing people differently, and you start noticing what role we have usually in disagreements and arguments. And we usually just get in there, and by not reacting as much, things just automatically start calming down in our lives.
Okay, so what you just touched on there, can we talk about what you're sharing, this mindfulness and these practices and things you are doing, you are learning to be proactive in your life rather than reactive. And I feel most people live from that knee-jerk reaction state.
Well, it's how we're raised, right? That's our culture.
Yeah.
We're raised to, just do all these things. This is what success is. Just do all these things. And you might get things that way, material things, but it just doesn't usually equate to happiness and joy. And that's usually why we want them, but that doesn't bring it. We just want more things when we get them. We just keep wanting, our culture teaches us it's to produce things and consume things. And
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that, on its own. Is just when we look for our happiness in it. We have to find happiness an inside job. We all know people that don't have anything that are happy, and we all know people that are really successful and that are miserable human beings. You know, but
Yeah.
I believe, and what I train is that you can do both. You can have things and be happy. It's great, but it,
Here's
it requires extending yourself and giving back and serving and
yeah.
having a grateful outlook.
Here's what I want to talk about now. You released a book this year in which, I want to talk about these 12 pillars that you teach. Can you talk more about your book and the
Yeah.
pillars?
Profit with Presence, the 12 Pillars of Mindful Leadership. It's a book that I talk about where, affluence increases your influence. And
Mm,
it's okay. We live in a capitalist society. A lot in the mindfulness community think money's dirty. A lot in the business community think mindfulness is woo woo. And I say, no, you're
yeah.
both wrong. It has to be okay to make money and live in a capitalist society. And it has to be okay to be mindful. The purpose of life the purpose of business can't be that different from the purpose of life. It has to be making a difference and connecting with people. So the book tells, my story and how I believe you can do that and how I've done it and shown others how they can do it. The 12 pillars, the first three are foundational pillars. They're, be present and practice mindfulness, finding something, some practice where you can be mindful. Number two is identifying your purpose in life. So often we haven't, I taught at the university for 20 years, mostly seniors, and I'd have so many of them come in, that last semester, and I just said, "Why are you here?" And they said, "I don't know. Mom and Dad said they'd pay for it if I studied engineering or business, and I'm here. What's next?" I'd say, "What do you want to?" I'd say, "Next, it's going to be, job, job, wife or husband, mortgage. You got kids. You're going to wake up and you're going to be 50. Give a little thought to why you're here, what your purpose is in life." And most of us just haven't. We've been given our purpose by culture.
Yeah.
Our parents and our culture have said, no, your purpose is to get a job and make some money and get a house. Well, those are things you do, but they're not a purpose. So spend some time finding that. Initial purpose is generally waking up and finding presence. And once you find presence, then you find out what really turns you on, what you're really good at, and you love to do. And they're not always the same thing. How do you find that? And so that those are your outer purposes, what you do. The third is a kind of a mouthful, but it's finding clarity, vision, intention, commitment, and habits. Clarity is really the first two, is, creating some mindfulness and purpose. That's creating clarity. Vision is, what really, from that point of clarity, what do I want? Not what culture wants, not what culture's told me that I need to have the 3 houses and the country club and, whatever it is, and the bigger car. No, what is really my, and the funny thing is that most everybody I come across comes in thinking that what they want is really more stuff. And when they really want it, what they really want is connection. What they really want is better relationships, to really be seen and heard by others, and to really see and hear others.
Yeah.
And that's the gift of slowing down a little bit with mindfulness. And it's, the other thing is, that's just great for business. Relationships are just all built around listening. And it's not like always why we do it, but it's a huge business tool, is listening and being in relationship with others. Intention, we've talked about a little bit already, but intention is what moves the world. Things that just on the subatomic level, things are moved by our intention.
Yeah.
And if you lack it, if you lack intention, you lack power, because you're not really moving things at the subatomic level. You may be, and it's just hard to get momentum. But with your intention, you start moving everything you do in the direction that you want. Commitment and habits go together. So if I make commitments, I'm going to have this practice, or I'm going to start this business, or I'm going to go to the gym or whatever. But if my commitments are out of line with my habits, they're going to be really hard to keep, because I'm an habitual creature. I think the stats say somehow something about 95% of what we do is on that unconscious level. We just do the next habitual thing.
Yeah.
Well, what I believe is we can train what that next habitual response is, to be consistent with our vision, and consistent with our intention, and consistent with our commitments. Therefore, when I fall off my commitment a little bit, my habits keep me going. And when I fall off my habits, that sickness or that vacation or that whatever it is, my commitment keeps me going. So they're a system that work together. But it's really, really important to pay attention to have our commitments and our habits be consistent, because we are our habits. That's just full stop. We are our habits. That's who we become. So we have to train ourselves, and that's those little tiny steps that are consistent that we do on a daily basis. So those are the other pillars are more mindset, like gratitude, service, those kind of things. But the first 3 pillars are the foundational ones, and then the other 9 are more or less, you know, things along the line of affluence increases influence. People say, well, you're going to make money, you're going to make a difference. Well, let me tell you what, if you have some money, you can make a bigger difference. If you have the intention to serve, money's not a detriment, it's an asset.
I love that. Okay, so these top 3 that you just shared,
Yeah.
that was a lot of golden nuggets, a lot of wisdom in one, and something I want to touch on. Number 2, you talked about purpose. And I remember being in my 20s, and I literally, so I was, I chased the American dream, which I found out 10 years in, it wasn't my dream. But I literally used to Google, what is my purpose? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? I was Googling that, and I live in curiosity, and I was reading the books because, like, deep down, I knew I wasn't on the right path, but I didn't know what to do. And what I want to share today, and I want to ask you, I found that what came to me naturally and easily and a lot of joy was being a teacher. And my
Awesome.
7th birthday, my dad built me a playhouse. Back then we lived in Littleton, and I had a chalkboard, and I used to, torture my brother and my cousins. I was always the teacher. So I went to college, found out they made 35 grand a year, and I was like, okay, that's not my path. I can't do that. And I chased, just a communication marketing degree. But it come full circle when I got off a definition of success that wasn't mine, and created my own. I have created a way of living. I left a 9 to 5 for a 24/7, 365. And I love what I do. Like this
Mhm.
never turns off. I love what I do. So I want to ask you, what does purpose mean to you? How did you quote find yours?
Well, I stumbled, I tried everything. I just
Yeah.
knew I had the material things and I didn't have happiness. I was still irritable and restless.
Yeah.
Um, and I taught because I knew I needed something. I wasn't sure what. And I loved it. And I love teaching. It's a natural part of me. And I learned, I run my business by teaching others. So I share that with you, just
Yeah.
an affinity to teach and share. I'd say I just tried a lot of different things until, and I was stuck for years in the paradigm of awakening and reading a lot of Eastern texts and meditating and awakening, those kind of things. And then on the other side, business uh, was there, and a lot of what I was reading said, "Hey, you got to give up all your possessions. You got to just go sit on a hill in India somewhere." And finally, I met a guy that shared another. Larry Kendall runs Ninja Selling here in Fort Collins. Shared, a lot of the other texts and a lot of the things. He says, no, these things are equally as applicable in business. You can do it, and that just really turned a lot for me. And then I saw, you know what? I'm a businessman. I love business. My purpose is to be a businessman. And for years, I was embarrassed about that, that it just was too shallow,
Mm.
that I needed to be, more wholesome or something. And, business makes the world move, especially if you can be mindful of business. And what's missing from capitalism is consciousness. It can't be just five people having all the money. It's got to be that it's something, if you can help somebody, you help them, you
Yeah.
know, and you serve and you share things. And then it's a beautiful system because it's so creative and so free and you can do what you want. And, it's great. It's efficient, but it's got to have some mindfulness and capitalism. So I found my purpose is to be a businessman and to share mindfulness in the business community. Say, business can really work. Business moves the world
Well,
and it
and I
can
think, yeah,
incorporate so many things.
on
Sorry.
that note, there's enough for all of us. And I think
Yeah.
even a huge cultural paradigm and conditioning is scarcity, fear, lack, limitation. It's a dog eat dog world. And I love what you're doing in a business sense because I don't think that is talked about, or I haven't
Yeah.
experienced that. In my past roles when I was in corporate, there was nothing about consciousness and mindfulness. And I love what you're doing. Back to your pillars real quick. On step 3, the ones you talked about, I want to highlight clarity
Yeah.
because I find in the work that I'm doing, I have a free resource on my website called the Life Assessment. And that is what I see hands down most often, individuals who lack clarity. And I just want to ask you, is it really that they lack clarity? Is it because it's rooted in fears? Like what's really going on?
I think we've just naturally adopted culture's vision, our family's vision, our school's visions, the government's vision. The culture is commercials have shown us what we supposed to have been doing, and we haven't had, in older cultures they had times, they had rites of passages, they had ceremonies, they had things in which you had to really look deep and find, like vision quests and the Indian community. You had to look deep at different times and really find out. And we don't have that now. We have just a path which says, go to school, go to college if you can, or get a job and make, this, and this is success. And it isn't the same for everybody. We're unique. We're snowflakes. We have to be able to really spend some. So I say clarity, so that I know, and I think clarity is important before vision because I have to set my own vision. It's
Yeah.
great that I got some input from my parents and I got some input from mentors at school and whatnot. But at some point in time, I have to take the time to say, wait a minute, this is what's important to me. When I get out of this life, this is what I would like to have experienced.
Yeah.
And I just think that without clarity, we are adopting somebody else's. And there's so many. I mean, every advertiser wants you to adopt theirs. What's your purpose in life? Well, to buy this car. to travel to this place, to get on a cruise. And those aren't purposes.
You know
They're
what
just things to do.
I want to offer and ask you? I think for me, clarity is taking the time to sit down and do some self introspection. And for
Yes.
me, my clarity in leaving corporate was that it wasn't aligned with my core values, that I value being creative and freedom. For me, that was time and financial freedom, not being chained to a 9 to 5 telling me how to live my life. That was my clarity. What could you offer others who are like, you know what, I need to sit down and figure this out?
Well, it starts with an intention to do that and to notice that and to really have the will to do it because it takes some work, you know. I mean, every business is great at grabbing our attention and telling us what we want to buy, and what we want to do. And so is the government. It's we got to get GDP up. We got to get it. We got to keep going. Well, GDP is not a purpose. There's nothing wrong with it, and it can help improve, living standards, but that doesn't mean I'm going to find joy, happiness, fulfillment, satisfaction. If you want those things, it takes some time to dive in and something to clear out. We've been divorced from nature. So some time in nature can be great, but somehow some quietness. So we really get in and flush out, and someone to help you can be great. Some books, there's some great books, to get started. And what am I all about? What makes me tick? What do I want to do? Because, and the sad thing is, I think in our world is our biggest time is work. And it's when we're dressed to go. It's our prime, we feel the best. It's a prime part of the day. And so much of it, we go to work so that we can have a life later. And we're tired. We're
Yeah.
exhausted.
Yeah.
The job of the employer is to get everything they can out of you, and they do it. You're exhausted, so you don't have that time. So I really find melding it with your purpose and work is the number one, if you can, like what you've done. Because you live your life all day long. I don't want to wait till 6 or 7 at night to live my life.
Yeah.
I want to live it all day long. So congratulations, way to go, you did it.
I'm still doing it. You know what
You are, and you're sharing it.
I call
It's awesome
entrepreneurship personal development on steroids.
for entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But everyone isn't an entrepreneur either,
Right.
right?
Here,
So finding out what that is for you.
something that's top of mind for me, and I'm just curious your perspective on it. I think a lot of people like what you just touched on, going through life's motions, waiting for that time to then start living, or I just need to get this thing done and
Oh,
then I'll be happy. My thing is like time is of the essence. I have this urgency we all have an expiration date. That's what I call it. We don't know when that is. And I think people think they have decades to go, but it's not guaranteed. So, what is your message to offer people like you're living now? The time is now.
well, and the statistics show there's a lot of studies out of Harvard that happiness comes first. Happiness makes you more successful. I found that we've lived a do have be life, which means I do all the right things. I go to the right school. I get the right grades.
Mhm.
I get the job. I work my butt off. I do all that. And then I get to have the vacations and this kind of houses. And then I get to be happy. Well, I found for myself and everybody else that we just change the goalposts. Even if we bear down and just suck it up and just get through it and do it, when I get there, the house isn't big enough. I thought it was six-figure salary, but that's not enough. It's this, it's that. I keep moving the goalposts, and the Jones next door have more, so I need more. So then I go, okay, and then I'll be happy. And then I get there and no, and then I'll be happy. And it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
We just keep, it's a trip. We say, oh, I want to go on a trip. So we start on a bus. If I could just fly, we fly. And I said, could I be in first class? Could I get in first class? We get in first class. Could I fly private? Oh, and then we said, geez, these guys are going to the moon. Let's go to the moon. We just keep changing the goalposts. So we have to turn that on its head and say, no, I have to be happy now. Because if I'm not happy now, I won't be happy when I have things. Just doesn't, things don't make me happy. They're
Mm.
not bad. They don't make me unhappy, but I can't, my happiness is not going to come from those. So I have to switch it on and say, No, what really turns me on? What makes me happy? And if I do that, and I always say, now who's going to get the call? The business person that's happy, that asks somebody how they're doing, what their day is, that's grateful, or someone that's, unhappy, discontent, ungrateful. I just think you're going to call, I mean, in business, you can be successful and be miserable. That's been proven. I did it and I've seen a lot of other people. But who's going to really get the call? I think who's going to get the call. This person makes you feel better. When they call them and say, geez, Heather's always happy. I think I'll give Heather a call. I'll give her the business. Either consciously or unconsciously, I do that.
Here's what I want to know from you, especially where you're at today, and you've been doing this kind of work for decades. What are your daily rituals?
I have a daily routine. I haven't missed a day in about 8 years and they've been, some days they're very short. I do just because I have a 6 a.m. flight or something, or I'm sick or something, life happens. But I start every day with a journal of gratitude, listing some gratitudes, and I do affirmations, something there in the journal. If I have dreams, I journal about dreams. I do that, something, right? If it's something on my mind, I journal about it. I read 10 pages from a good book, at least 10. I read a lot more than that. I love to read. But to read something, because we're trying to fill our mind, not with what other people want, but what do I want my thoughts to be? What do I want to, if I want to train myself, I got to put some good stuff in. Meditation helps me clear out the old, help me recognize that I'm not my thoughts. I have thoughts, I'm not my thoughts. But then I want to reprogram myself. So I put things into that I want to do that program myself. And I do yoga every day. Now I also, yoga is not for everybody, but somehow to mindfully get into your body. That's the first refuge from the craziness of the mind, is get into the body. It's just so empowering. Oh, I do something in that world every day. I used to run, and now I'm an old man, so now I walk. But I walk every day.
Come on now, there's 90-year-olds running
I know
marathons.
there are, but my knees didn't do it anymore, so I
I
had
know.
to start
You know,
walking, and it's
I'm in
been
this
great.
I'm in the same boat. I'm a runner and I'm even at the point I'm like, and that's why actually I think it was a couple of years ago I got into triathlons, trying to use some other
Uh-huh.
muscles and groups, but man, I love running. I just my knees don't.
I love it. And I was training for a marathon. I got hurt and I've never really been able to get back to
Yeah.
where I was going. But so I never thought I'd be a walker, but it's helped me in a lot of ways, because a lot of my challenge is to slow down. One mindfulness
Mm,
practice is to go at 70%. The other thing is great is my wife likes to walk. So that's been great for our relationship,
yeah.
that I take a walk with her.
I love that. And the non-negotiables you shared with me, they're simple that anyone can do. And that's why I love asking that question, is because there's no one way to do this. I
No,
just like offering
totally not.
individuals different ways and figure out what works for you.
And do something,
Yes. I love that.
do something.
All right, here's what I want to ask you, because we touched on a lot, living in the gap and the 12 pillars and mindfulness, but what do you believe is a key takeaway you want listeners to get?
Start small and be consistent. Start small. It isn't, and it can be completely private. It's still, not, it's gaining a lot of steam, mindfulness, particularly in the business community or everywhere, but it's still not the culture. So keep it private, start small, be consistent, until you really are sure. Like when you've gotten the benefits that I've gotten from it, you'll come on a podcast or you'll stand up on the mountain and say, hey, try this. But until you do, just keep it to yourself and notice the benefits. Share it with, your closest friends or someone else you think, but you don't have to do that. But it takes a practice. So hold yourself accountable, maybe find an accountability buddy and get started. The rewards are amazing.
Yes, I love that. All right, I have a few rapid fire questions to wrap up the interview.
Let's go.
What is a quote or motto that you live by?
I would say the best way to predict the future is to create it.
Dispenza would say, not from the known, but the unknown.
There you go.
Yes. What is a book you're currently reading or highly recommend?
Um, I would highly recommend a book called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson.
And you told me that in the pre-call. So
Yeah,
yes, I got it. I got the message. I told you it's on my bookshelf. So I
great. Get it
next
off
up,
of there. Dust it off.
next up. All right, final question. What advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, start small and be consistent. You know, so I had a tendency to really, have to take on the mountain, you know, and I've just learned it's the little things in life that make the big difference. And even when you do tackle that mountain, if you have the base from the little things that you've done, the little tiny practices, the little, stopping and saying hello to somebody, when you really didn't have time, but just making the time, do the little things, start small, be consistent.
Yes, and such a great note to end on. Eric, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Heather. It's awesome. Thanks.